You can hear his voice on WTA Media. That is one of the many different broadcast properties that you'll be able to listen to him. I am honored. I am thrilled to have Mark Valledy with me. He is a commentator and doing so many great things in this world when it comes to a variety of different sports. I'm Brian Fenley, and this is the Sports Media with a Human Touch podcast. Mark, thanks so much for being a part of this.
Pleasure. This has been in the diary for a while. Looking forward to it.
How many different sports at this point have you commentated on?
Oh, it's funny they build up, don't they? I mean, predominantly, I'm tennis, predominantly with the WTA, which I love and enjoy. But I've done some snooker, which is another big sport here in the UK and across the world. I don't know how big it is stateside at the moment, snooker, but it's a sport that I played a lot when I was young, so to commentate on it was such an honor. But as well as that, I've done a bit of darts, a bit of football, beach tennis. I've started recently, which is so much fun. Absolutely fantastic. Wheelchair tennis and water polo and sailing. There you go for the Olympics last year. So it's a bit of everything.
What would be the next one that you'd want to do?
Oh, what would I like to do next? Wow. Um, yeah, that's a good question. I fancy a bit of golf. Golf I enjoy. I play a bit of golf. A bit more sort of laid back, so that would be quite a good style to get into. But yeah, I'd like to do some golf, some pool. There you go. Moscone Cup's been and gone fairly recently. I'd love to do a bit of pool 'cause that's quite high octane. So yeah, do you know what? I just whatever sport I do, I just love getting to know it and immersing myself in it and sharing the passion of the fan base. So yeah, there's been a few. I think it's double figures now. So yeah,
Double
without
figures.
realizing it.
Yeah, and more will be added on before you know it. You've talked about immersing yourself in really being a student of the sport and learning and growing in knowledge. What does
Mm.
that look like for you, and to what depths you go to firmly understand what you're calling, what you're commentating on?
Yeah, I mean, it is first and foremost, it's research. It's getting to know a match on a level, a match itself, but the sport itself, it is just taking yourself into that event. And I do find, for example, with the tennis, it's a sport that I love. So I almost feel like I'm halfway there anyway. But when you get to know the backstory of players or an event or what it means to them, especially if you got someone, for example, remember last year we had I think Paula Badosa coming back from bad injury and she played at Washington and what that meant to her, you could see it match in, match out when she won. She got through injury free. It meant so much, and suddenly you're going along that journey with her. And I do find that when you see players, especially at sort of lower level tournaments, winning matches, you become part of the journey. And I think that then comes across when you're commentating on it. You think actually forget about the score. Look what it means to that person, and then you're suddenly you think, yeah, I'm invested. And that's the key, I think, with me is I like to get invested in a story, in a player's journey, because I think then it just gives it another level.
In what you're saying, in that it gives it another level, how does giving it that next level, do you feel like impact the audience and how much they're going to be dedicated to the product and wanting to be intently watching, given the way in which you're building up this match or this sporting event that you're calling?
Absolutely, and that's the key. Is I think if you can find another layer, it becomes more than just dare I say, on some occasions, a background match, you think, actually, hold on a minute, this particular person, they've had 6 months out with injury, and this is their first tournament back, and a lot's riding on it. I think then you find yourself getting drawn into it. So yes, I think it does. It does actually. I think it draws people more into it when you think actually it's more than just a tennis match or it's more than just a frame of snooker or whatever. There's a lot more to it, and I think if you can give it another layer, you are, I think you're taking people on a journey with you.
In doing so, with the storytelling and the empathy you have and the emotions that you foster and you find that come through during your broadcast and what you see from the athletes, if I'm watching one of your broadcasts, what are the mark musts beyond the storytelling, the anecdotes that you are going to want the audience to know that you're doing every single time that
Oh,
you're commentating?
yeah, invested, passionate, um, and absolutely living and breathing that match because I think that's my duty. My duty is when I'm broadcasting to whoever's watching, whatever sport, my duty is to make sure that it's must see. So I am fully invested. I am passionate. I have done my research and I care. And I do. And that's the thing about it. I haven't met hardly any of these players or any of these athletes, but I find myself caring. And I think if that's coming across, if people are saying to me, yeah, I love that. I love the fact that you were so involved, so passionate. You were on a journey, and you told a story along the way, and you've almost maybe taught someone about a player. Then I think, yeah, my job's well done.
I always find that with what you're saying, that the story and the characterization of these athletes and building a plot and that telling what the match is like, and there's the climax moment, the big point, whatever, that it comes down to being a good storyteller, it comes down to being a good writer. You as a creative writer over the course of your life, how much have you read creative writing, read novels, or you yourself immerse yourself in wanting to write in some capacity just to sort of to scratch the itch that is storytelling and creativity?
You see, I don't have a background so much in reading and writing, but my background prior to commentary was a creative background. So I used to be a creative a producer, sports producer. So I would make promos, trailers that would be designed in 30 seconds, 45 seconds to tell a story. So it's almost a carry on from that. I did that for about 15, 16 years. And so I think that side of me wanting to sort of create a story, create a feeling, if you like, carried itself from when I used to do that as a job into commentary. So that sort of creativity has always been there, but I guess I never realized it was there in this form.
Well, that's a great revelation because in what you're doing now and compared to what you're doing in the past, like you have to tell, you only have that finite small amount of time to
Yeah.
get that point across. So you have to be
Mm.
very judicial with your words. And in a sport like tennis, where there's only so many different places and times to talk, how has it come to be that you know how to use your words in finite amount of time best compared to say another sport where you're talking over the action all the time and in tennis you have to be more resolute with what you say and when you say it.
I mean, you know yourself. You commentate on a great deal of tennis yourself, and I think some of it is instinct. And you sort of know a good time to come in. And say, for example, we're very lucky with tennis in so much you have say you have a 20 shot, wonderful rally finish with a lob or something. You'll get the replay to be able to talk, but in the back of your mind, you're always thinking, well, I need to, I need to bring this in. I need to wrap it up because the next point's starting. So it does help with tennis that we do have, and certainly with the WTA, we have sort of guidelines that will say, do try and talk here, don't talk here, whatever. And that goes for I think any tennis matches. You generally don't talk over the action a great deal, but you've generally got about 25, 30 seconds after a great point to go, yes, and pick out the best points and then quickly, instinctively bring it to a close, and then on to the next.
Before you go to the next and when you're wrapping up and concluding a broadcast, what is the way in which you do finish out a broadcast and what you say and what you want to get across?
It's just again, I kind of I like to make it quite personal, quite warm. So if I'm sort of wrapping up, I'll always say to people, it's been great to have your company today. Thank you. By the way, let's point you over here because there's this match going on court one, and so I'm always trying to sort of say to people, I'm here and thank you, but the bigger picture is the tournament, and don't go now because actually there's something going on next door, or this match is happening later. So I like to sort of, I'm always grateful. I always feel within myself that I'm incredibly lucky to do what I do. And I like to thank people. I'll always thank people when I start a match to say, thanks for joining me. I appreciate your time. And when I'm leaving, I'll say the same. But also in the back of my mind, I'll always be thinking, well, let's not forget it's over. I might be over on your court, but make sure everybody knows that there's another brilliant match next door. And so, yeah, I like to sort of have the personal touch, but not forget the bigger picture.
You've got the gratitude as well, which I think is so
Mm.
important, can never be
Oh, yeah.
forgotten.
Yeah. Mm.
How grateful are you to the people that have seen your skills and your talents and know what you bring and have you, and just the way in which you show that gratitude to them, and that they have helped build and grow your career and
Oh,
where it is now?
hugely. I mean, I've been incredibly lucky. I mean, I fell into this. I was working as a creative producer for DAZN in London, and they happened to need commentators, and I just sort of said, "Oh, I'll give it a go." And they've been really supportive. They've developed me. They've critiqued me. They've said this is good, this isn't so good, but they've always been very fair with me, and have always given me opportunities, and I am always grateful for that. And the same goes for, I'm lucky to work with the ITF and Eurosport, and I'm very lucky because this is a very, very privileged position to be in, and I think I consider myself quite grounded anyway, and I think it's important that you always appreciate people that help you, and so I will always be grateful for that, and I will always help people as well because I think that's an important quality. Is be nice. A couple of my co-commentators when I first started out said to me, "Do you know one of the most important things is just be nice to people because it's it's noticed and it will help you and you'll always feel better for yourself." And I've always tried to be that. But for the people that have supported me and given me opportunities, then I always let them know. I
Yeah.
always let them know because it means a lot.
Those people you were just referencing, they've let you know about where you've grown. You're talking about the feedback very initially when you were getting into, say, tennis. Hey, we like
Yeah.
this, we don't. What was that like as far as like you taking the feedback and you being like, yeah, this is okay, so I'll work on that. Like, what were they? Well, first of all, what did they see the early strengths that you had as you were building yourself as a broadcaster and as a commentator, the initial signs that they were like, yeah, keep doing that. We like that. You have a good grounds there.
100% passion. I mean, the thing is that when I started working for the WTA, I was already making promos for WTA tennis and had been for many years. So I was so invested in the sport and so passionate about it. So once I actually got on the other side and was able to do it, it was like a kid in a sweet shop. It was like, wow. And so I think that came across. So if anything, I think early on they probably said to me, "We love the fact you're so invested. Just a little bit down, maybe not quite as over the top, if you like." And it's then just taking the technical nuances. It's just like we said about the when you should and shouldn't speak, and just getting to know that and to just judge judge a mood as well. And I think that's the other thing I think that held me in good stead earlier on was that I was lucky enough to. I think one of my first matches, I think it was Indian Wells. I think Petra Kvitova got injured, And I remember at that time just feeling such a wave of empathy. And I remember them saying afterwards, it's good that you've got the human touch. So the strengths, I think the strengths that were there fundamentally, I've always kept, and they came quite naturally. And it's just working the other areas that I could probably improve upon to get that blend.
One of those other areas which I find fascinating in my own studies is for tennis per se, the tactics of it, the different ways and styles of a certain tennis player and how they vary from another. How much have you gone about learning the tactics and the stuff that, say, if you're just tuning in, you're not necessarily noticing, but the mind games underneath and understanding tactically what this person is going to do, but I'm going to do this, and just the sort of way in which they go back and forth with each other, the tennis players.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I love the. I had a match the other day. Julie Saver was, I can't remember who she was against, but it was a contrast of styles, and I love that. I love the mind games. I love the fact that you've got a, for example, maybe a power player against a craft player. But the mind games I really love. I love the fact that certain players will play to their respects. I'm not saying it's definitely not saying it's dark arts, but just knowing that the buttons to push that might just get under the skin of an opponent. I love all that. I think it's fascinating. I always think it's a sports, as is a lot of sports, but particularly tennis when it's an individual sport, one on one or two on two with doubles, that if you know how to maybe get into the mind of an opponent, it can give you an extra 20%. That could be the difference between winning a match and losing a match. But learning about the sport tactically, that's something that's just come through watching a lot of tennis. Lucky enough to work with a lot of very good co-commentators who, when I work with them, and again, you must find this yourself, Brian, you think, okay, I am really listening to you here because there's things that you're pointing out that I wouldn't even know what to look for. So you're learning all the time, and I think that's the beauty of it. You're learning the tactical side, and I think one of the biggest compliments I think I was lucky enough to get off one of my co-coms the other week was like, you do realize you know so much more than you think tactically, and I'm like, I must have been watching then. So I'm happy with that.
Well, and to listen to them, the importance of like when you're mid commentary in a match to say, okay, it's my time or I'm talking, but you're also, when your co-commentator is talking, to listen to them while you're thinking about what you're going to say next. What is your way in which to sort of delegate, okay, I got to listen to what they say because they might say something that I might use as if to transition smoothly into what I want to say. And at the same time, I want to inject my own belief system on the match and not just repeat what they said, if that makes some sort of sense there.
Absolutely. Do you know what? Again, it's instinctive. So often, you'll get, for example, a co-com may just be going over a point, and you're thinking to yourself, okay, I'm watching the action as well because we need to make sure we come out on time. And I might be thinking, well, I'm going to say this, and then she may say, actually, oh, and then they did that, and then suddenly your thought process changes to like, oh, that's a really good point. So it's almost like you've got to be incredibly agile mentally to go, okay, I'm watching a match. This is my take on it, single comms. But when you're co-comming, you're then thinking, well, I've now got an expert with me, and so I've got to think, I've got to listen to what they're saying for my benefit because I'd like to learn. And as you say, then actually listen and think, well, shall I pick this up and put that on? But a lot of the time, I'll be there scribbling. So if they've said something, I'll be literally going, okay, that's a really good point about maybe their movement or showing signs of an injury. And so then I'll bring it in maybe at a later point if it occurs again. But it's constantly just being this sponge where you're just thinking, this is what I'm saying. I'm taking in what's being said to me, and then I'll just throw it in the air and see what comes out at some point. But it's quite a Yeah, it's multitasking, definitely.
For sure. And how much time, and I know this is kind of a challenge because, especially if you're working a certain day and there's matches happening one after another, but ideally, what sort of conversations would you like to have, say, with a co-commentator before you get on the air? In terms of like, hey, here's where my strengths are. What can I do to get the best out of you as well?
Absolutely. I think for me, a philosophy I've always had with any work I've done, and certainly with commentary, is preparation. So before we start, I will sit down with a co-com and say, look, this is generally how I will work. I will lead most points, and I will come out quite sharp, and then you come in. And then so it's quite formulaic initially, but I'll always say to the co-com, if you want to come in before me, just give me a sign. Just give me a little sign, and then I'll just sit back. And then you just get to know each other. And I've been lucky to work with three or four of my co-coms quite regularly, and so we just have an understanding. So at the beginning, there'll be a right. I'll come in at the first point. If you want to come in, just let me know, and we'll go from there. And then after a few games, I think you just relax, and then suddenly a bit of humor gets injected, and you're suddenly, and then you're in that really happy position where you feel like you're just two friends watching a tennis match and chatting. And I think when you've got that, perfect, because then you're relaxed and you've got the audience with you, and then it flows beautifully.
You said it because there's the watching of the broadcast, but I think it's understood or taken for granted that, oh, this idea of the commentators knowing when they're working together when to talk and when not to talk over each other. But like there are hand signals that stuff. There are different ways of communicating that are behind the scenes that over when you're watching the match of tennis, you don't see what's going on behind the scenes. So those are really interesting to me as far as how you delegate when it's time, when you take a back seat, when you have something to say, and the ways in which that comes across and how important that is, the communication. And then afterwards, per se, what time, if any, because oftentimes, you might be doing one match and then going right into another, but would you say, I want to go back and I want to see how I did that? Or like sort of reviewing yourself or being like, I like that, but then what happens if I did it that way? As if to just kind of constantly challenge yourself.
I'm not great at looking back at myself. I mean, yeah. I mean, it's important, and sometimes I will always ask for feedback. I will speak to whoever is hiring me and say, look, are you happy? If you're happy, then I'm carrying on as I am instinctively. You know, occasionally I will look back if I've had a match where I've felt maybe I've struggled a little bit or there's been a little element of uncertainty. I might look back and think, well, maybe I could change this. But I think a lot of the time it's a feeling. And sometimes you might just think, I just didn't quite feel it today. And so you just think, okay, what do I need to do next time to get to that high level? I think as commentators, we are our own worst critics. And I think you can always sort of think, oh, could have done that better. But I just try to stay in the moment. So when I've finished a match, unless it's been a disaster, I'll move on to the next, and I will await feedback if there is any, or ask for it. But generally, looking back, no, I don't know. I don't enjoy it. I guess.
When you are to think about like, oh, maybe if I did this, maybe if I did that, you said it. It's just how harsh we are on ourselves. The audience really doesn't know, So it's like you might be like, why? You might be like, I should have said that, or maybe you like that. The audience isn't going back there and like, why didn't Mark say that? Like, it's like, so it's like the finite of details that separate you from like thinking this or thinking that only really you notice. And this attention to detail that you have, and this perfectionistic like mindset, while like you said, if you go too far, it can kind of like, okay, it's time to move on. But where do you feel like attention to detail and perfectionism is really good for you in your line of work?
I think it's they are important qualities. So I think our audience, although you say won't necessarily be picking up on how you feel, they are knowledgeable. So if your attention to detail and you're not on, on that high level in terms of say a player's performance or their statistics, will get called out. And that they are really important to me. Getting those details right is important because that is a prerequisite of the job. You need to know your stuff. If you don't know it, don't say it. But I like to have little nuggets of information that I can just sort of throw in, and I think it adds to the match, adds to the story sometimes. But I think as well, because we're at a high level, we're world feed a lot of the time. That information's got to be right because if it's not, you'll get pulled up on it. So it's really important.
What's important when it comes to broadcasting beach tennis?
Fun. I mean, it just. I was asked to do it sort of March April time, and I just thought, oh, this is new, and I had a couple of days to sort of get myself immersed in it. And once I started, I just thought this is great, and it is just fun. I mean, it's the rules are there. It's effectively, the ball can't bounce, and it's very athletic and fast moving. But it's so full on. The crowds are involved. There's music playing. It just brings out the fun side, And so you start a match there, and the music's blaring away, and everyone's high fiving. The camaraderie between the players from both sides are high fiving each other, whether they win or lose. They're making sure the other's okay if they hit them with the ball, and it makes you feel happy. It's such a fun sport. I mean, I'm so glad I get a chance to do it. It's yeah, that demands high energy and passion, because that's what you got going on around you.
What I notice is you mentioned darts as well that you do.
Mm,
When I've watched some of that, there is high energy, there
yeah.
is passion, especially from the commentator like yourself or in the crowd. For
Mm.
those stateside that don't have access to as much darts on television as, say, in the UK, I am enthralled by the amount of energy that comes out of that. Where does that stem from? The crowd goes bonkers in excitement during darts.
Darts, yeah. I mean, darts is a funny old sport. If you had watched darts 25, 30 years ago, darts used to be not particularly, shall we say, athletic individuals on a stage with a lot of smoke and a lot of alcohol, and the crowd were. It was just a mumble in the background, and it was losing viewership. People weren't invested in it, and then Barry Hearn came along, Matchroom came along, and they just gave it a shot of energy. The players suddenly got nicknames. The crowd were encouraged to shout and sing and dress up, and the sport has been revolutionised. I think the winner of the World Championships in the darts now, I think it's over £500,000. And it's at the Alexandra Palace, end of the year into the new year every year, and the tickets go on sale in July, and that's 17, yeah, nearly 17 days of action, afternoon and evening, gone in less than a day. They are all sold out within a day, and you look at it as a spectacle, and you think to yourself, and I've been to the Alexandra Palace to watch it, and you can't hardly see anything because it's only a stage that far away with a little dartboard. But what you're going for is the party because it's literally people plan their Christmases around it. They'll dress up in fancy dress, and they have Christmas do's there. It is a cacophony of noise, and it just works. And you think to yourself, it's a dartboard about 5 miles away, and everyone is loving it. And you just think to yourself, that's clever marketing. But it's the turnaround in darts, how they've turned it around from a pub sport that was really struggling to a sport now that it is appointment to view in this country over Christmas on TV. Yeah, absolutely. And you think the darts is almost secondary to seeing the characters in the crowd, everyone drunking up, drunking. There you go, dressing up and getting more drunk as the night goes on.
Well, they are. I mean, yeah, you said
Yeah.
it. That's exactly it. And speaking of a pub sport,
Hmm.
snooker,
Yeah.
if I'm not mistaken. So
Hmm.
you saying you obviously broadcast it. You've said you've played.
Yeah.
When you have come from that background and now you're commentating on snooker, what enviable insights does that bring you in how you want to use your words to convey what's happening?
Again, it's feeling. I mean, the thing is, I played it at a young age, and I was good at it, and it was a sport that I played when I was sort of 13, 14. I considered devoting my life to it to turn
Wow.
professional. Yeah, and I didn't. Part of me thinks, should I? Who knows? That's water under the bridge. But when I commentate on it, that's a case where I actually think to myself, I forget just how much I know the sport. So when a table's set up and a player's making a break, I can automatically think they're going to go for that ball or they're going to position that ball, and all that ball's a trouble because they've only got so many points left. So when I commentate at snooker, it's amazing how with tennis it was more the learning process because I hadn't played it much as a youngster. But with snooker, I just have a head start, and I just it's effortless.
When you're doing different sports, how do you differentiate between knowing, okay, this is the sport where the audience is expecting this style, this energy,
Mm,
which can be contrasting, say, from a tennis
mm.
to snooker?
Again, I think it's a feel. It's a feel for the sport. It's a feel for the audience that you're broadcasting to. So a snooker audience, snooker by definition is a lot more sedate than tennis, and the audience generally it's a lower key. So a lot of my snooker commentary will be fairly conversational. Unless there's an amazing shot to win a frame, then you might just lift it. But you just know in your heart, you think, well, actually, it would not blend well if I was going, oh, what a fantastic pot on the red. Be like, no, your average snooker audience doesn't want to hear that. They just want to. They just. It's much more tactically heavy, shall we say? You know, you're talking more about the intricacies of the sport.
I got one more for you, Mark,
Yeah.
and this has been really a joy in
Mm,
learning about the way in which your brain works, the way in which you go about preparation from a tennis standpoint, and all the broadcasting intricacies that you're so knowledgeable of and work with every single day. How because it's in this industry, there's always looking at I'm doing this, and there's always the look ahead to the next event.
mm,
And there's always this like, hey, what's next? But how do you allow yourself, or do you allow yourself to say to what extent you're happy with where you are, and what you get to do? Because you mentioned
mm.
gratitude, but there is a part, and I don't want to speak for you, but I know that for me, there's always people asking pressure of like, what's next? What's next? And it can get away and take away from the joy of the moment of
Yeah.
what we're doing.
Yeah, it's important, and I don't do it enough, if I'm honest with you. Um, I'm always thinking ahead, and I think that's again the nature of what we do. You always think, well, am I going to go out of fashion tomorrow? Is someone going to suddenly turn around to me and go, well, we don't really like your style anymore? But I think that's a lot of energy wasted, and it is, as you quite rightly say, especially after a long week. You know, if you've done a full week, I'll often turn off. Say I've been lucky enough to do a final. I'll turn it off and I'll just have that 5 or 10 minutes and go, that was fun. And aren't I lucky to be able to be the voice on that? And so they are really important moments because A, you don't know how long they're going to last, but also it just keeps you going. So you just think, okay, X, Y, and Z might happen in future, who knows? But I've done this for 8 or 9 years, and I do remember key moments sitting back after certain matches or certain events thinking, usually at the end of the season, I get very reflective. If we finish our final event in Hong Kong next month, I'll often sit back and I'll be like, right, how many days until we start again? But I'll also be thinking, yeah, this has been fun. And I do like to reflect and I like it keeps you grounded, but also it just reminds you that it's a fun thing to be doing, and it's important to do it. And you hit upon a good point. You do need to sometimes step back and go, yeah, this is good, and take it in and appreciate it.
Like you said, I don't do enough of it, and I think that not to suspect, but I'm sure a lot of people are in
Yeah,
that same situation where they
absolutely.
feel that way.
Mm.
This was so fun. This was a
Mm.
blast. And Mark, I am so thrilled for the opportunity to have you on here to really understand the way you think and the way that you have navigated your career, and a big fan of the work you do. And Mark Valledy, keep watching the work he is doing on socials, over on WTA Media. The list goes on. I'm Brian Fenley. Mark, such an honor, man. Thanks so much for engaging in this conversation with me.
Thank you. You take care.